Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota in Minneapolis, St. Paul. It is a joy to be with you, particularly now in this election 2024 season. Go ahead, Minneapolis. 19% uncommitted. You all are on the move. You got a lot going on up there. Keith Ellison, Ilhan Omar, Amy Klobuchar. Boy, Reverend McAfee, Spike. Sounds of Blackness. Oh, wow. I just love you in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Sending you all so much love and the whole audience and my AM 950 radio family. Please meet the Santita Jackson Morning Stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page and on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please go there, like and subscribe, and click the bell and be a part of the conversation. If you click the bell, you will find out whenever we go live. If you like and subscribe, you can help to grow the audience. And I want you to tell people about us because we have some of the best talk in the world right here on this show and on this station. We need your support. Please meet me also on Facebook, Santita Jackson and Friends, and on X, not Twitter, on X. That's right, at Santita J or at Santita J Show. So let's get right to it. It's election 2024. It is now, we're in the midst of the primary. And even though many people are now saying, okay, it's settled, we have the presidential candidates, at least in the two major parties, as RFK Jr. continues to get on ballots all around the country, as Dr. Cornel West continues to travel and excite the electorate. Don't count anyone out. Don't count any scenario out because we don't know. We don't know. We see Hill Harper running. We see other people running. Who would have thought that Hill Harper would abandon Hollywood? But guess what? He's done it and he's doing it, and other people are doing it too. People who have money, people who don't have money. They want to make a change. And I do hope that you will go get registered to vote. Find out if you're still on the voter rolls. Go to vote.org. Isn't that right, Livonia Perryman? Longtime Democratic political operative, of course, one of the original Rainbow Coalition. And you need to find out if you've been purged from the voter rolls. So go to vote.org. And if you've been purged, get back on the voter rolls. You can do that. But also, if you're having trouble at the polls, do not leave the polls. Call 1-866-OUR-VOTE. 1-866-OUR-VOTE, and do not leave the polls until your issue has been resolved. And I would humbly suggest that you not do the provisional ballot. You resolve that issue until you get a real ballot and you vote. That's what you do. And you can make that happen. So let's look at the vote. And let's look at the vote through the Fani Willis case. Everyone is looking at that. It has been determined, that's been the news flash today, that we will find out by Friday whether Fani Willis will be allowed to remain on the case or not. But that's your decision. When I say it's your decision, the judge who is making that decision, because this is not going before jury, Livonia Perryman, Democratic political strategist and award-winning radio and talk show host, television host in Detroit, but also nationally, Dwight McKee, Dean of the Ma'afa Project, and of course, the Redemption Project, and of course, senior advisor to presidential candidate Dr. Cornel West, and Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Esquire, National Leadership Team of Rainbow Push, as is Dwight McKee's one of the founders of Operation Push. But he is the senior pastor of the iconic Douglas Memorial Community Church, and he is a lawyer of growing national renown. But we're going to go to the former head of the Atlanta Rainbow Push Project to talk to us about what's happening in Atlanta right now. I mean, because it turns out that the judge in this case, who will decide whether Fani Willis stays on as a prosecutor in this case or not. It turns out it's an elected position. It turns out he's up for election right now, and up until a moment ago, he was unopposed. Talk to us, because, whenever, we vote for president, vice president, the senator, the U.S. representative, maybe a local official if the local election is hot, and then you go to all of these judges and you just say, look, let me just check, because I'm sick of this already. But we really shouldn't approach it that way, Robert Patillo.
You're absolutely correct. And one thing I think people need to remember is that because so few people vote in many of these judicial races, often they end up being completely unopposed. In addition to being unopposed races, often the judges are there for 10, 20, 30 years because no one's running against them. So then you ask yourself, how do these people initially become judges? Many of them were simply appointed by the governor when there's another vacancy. So either a judge retires or dies in office. So these are ostensibly lifetime appointments if you're on the Superior Court in many jurisdictions, not just Georgia, but specifically in Fulton County. And if you look at the demographic breakdown of judges compared to other countywide positions, such as county commission, etc., it is far wider and far more conservative because many of the judges did not have to actually stand for election their first time getting in office. They were appointed by the Republican governor. Similarly, in this case, with regards to President Trump and with regards to Fani Willis, the judge in this case, McAfee, was just appointed by Brian Kemp in the end of 2022. He was 33 years old, had never tried a major case, had been a lifelong prosecutor, but because he was a member of the Federalist Society, the same conservative group that picked Supreme Court justices for conservatives, he was appointed to be the judge in a judge in the Fulton County Superior Court. They do a blind drawing to see who gets major cases in theory, and because he was on the court, he drew this case. It just so happened to be a Federalist Society judge overseeing this case. And I think this goes to show the importance of every election down the ballot. Is not enough to make change on the federal level, not enough to make change on the state level. You have to go down to these local races, because if you're not looking at these local races, you're not affecting the most instant change that will immediately impact you and your family. The Fulton County Jail last year had 10 inmates die. Not people who have been convicted of at trial. These are people awaiting trial. 10 people died while in custody. A big portion. What happened? One person was eaten to death by bed bugs. People were stabbed to death by gangs. One person starved to death. And that's not even counting the number of suicides. And this is because the way the cases move in this county, some people are in custody for 4, 5, 6, 7 years before ever going before a jury, before ever going to trial. And when you have that lack of movement in cases, people are more susceptible to disease, more susceptible to violence, more susceptible to the ravages of a jail that was never meant to hold people that long. County jails are meant to hold you just up and until trial. They are not prisons. They're meant to hold you for a half decade or more. So as much as people want to talk about many of these kind of issues that are going on in the court system, there are bigger issues going on in the Fulton County Court that existed before Fani Willis and Donald Trump, that will exist after Fani Willis and Donald Trump. And if you look into almost any jurisdiction in any major city around the country, you'll see similar issues existing, and you have a pipeline that takes people from the prosecutor's desk directly to the bench to being a judge. So do you have judges that will deny bond for defendants that see motion from the prosecuting position? That's because they've only been prosecutors their entire lifetime. And similarly, in this case, in Atlanta, we have a lifetime prosecutor. How exactly can you expect justice when you're fighting against both the prosecutor and the judge who used to be a prosecutor ruling against you? This is why it's so important to focus on these down ballot races.
Who is this gentleman who is overseeing this case? And I guess he's someone that I think that we need to be looking at, because he could have a tremendous impact upon the election. I mean, this and what is the Federalist Society, and why is it that so many judges of great consequence are members of that?
Absolutely. Well, the Federalist Society, I want to start there because the Federalist Society, basically your freshman year or your 1L year in law school, they have different affinity groups. I was the president of the Black Law Students Association while I was in law school. I was the founder of the Civil Rights Law Society when I was in law school. But another organization is the Federalist Society, where they pick young conservative people who are interested in the law, and they start cultivating them. They start cultivating them for the bench and for large law firms, and they start cultivating them for judgeships. Many of the federal judges you see are come from the Federal Society list. Indeed, Donald Trump said that they just gave him a list of candidates, and he started packing them out on the federal bench and eventually on the Supreme Court. All three of the conservative justices that Donald Trump appointed to the Supreme Court were Federalist Society justices. They have a similar ideology, much of it based on the textual interpretation of the Constitution as posited by Scalia. Clarence Thomas is a Federalist. Alito is a Federalist. It's kind of that fast track for young conservative justices to the court. And when you see Donald Trump in his first term appointing 300 judges, nearly all of them came from the Federalist Society, and that they all have a certain viewpoint, a certain worldview, a certain view of the nature of government and the nature of prosecution and the role the judges have in our judicial system. They talk about being textuals, but in reality, often they're activist judges because they want to enact this conservative view of America through our judicial system. Now, on the question of the judge in the Trump case, as I said, he's a Federalist Society member. He was appointed at 33 years old to the bench, but he has not yet stood up to election in Fulton County. And that election comes May 21st, in a special election to solidify that seat. And that's when the voters in Fulton County will have the opportunity to decide if they want a Federalist Society judge appointed by the Republican Governor Brian Kemp, or if they want someone who's more representative of the demographics and the values of Fulton County. And this is why these midterm and these special elections that nobody shows up for are so important.
Well, he comes across as someone who's very reasonable. Mm-hmm. And many people have wondered if he's going to let Fani Willis stay. What say you? You're on the bar down there. You practice in Atlanta, in Fulton County.
Oh, I wouldn't want to speculate because, again, that's going to come down to his own judicial decision, the judicial logic. But I think the bigger issue is these ongoing issues in Fulton County, these ongoing issues in the Superior Court. When you have, 10 plus inmates die in custody, when you have people staying in custody for 5 years plus awaiting trial. I've before described getting arrested in Fulton County as getting abducted by aliens. Because you're minding your business one day, you're arrested, they deny you a bond in the courthouse, and now it might be 8 weeks before you have another hearing. What happens at 8 weeks, sometimes 16 weeks before you have a bond hearing? Well, now your job is gone because you haven't called anybody or shown up in the last 2 months. Your apartment is gone. Your possessions are put on the side of the road. Your car is repossessed if you have a car payment. Your credit is destroyed because you haven't paid any bills in multiple months. The utilities are turned off. It can literally take people the better part of a decade to recuperate from 60 or 90 days in the Fulton County jail for charges that ultimately end up being dismissed sometimes because of the nature of the system. So when we're talking about the embedded rot within the system, a lot of concentration is put on the Donald Trump and Fani Willis case, but there are far deeper issues. And one of the problems is so few people pay attention to judicial elections, and especially off-year special judicial elections in May, that you end up with judges that don't represent the people, who are prosecutors at heart, and it makes it very difficult to get the type of justice that we need in this county.
So when we are looking at these judicial races, we need to be asking what questions?
The first question you want to ask is this question of competency. What has this person done before that qualifies them to be a judge? If the only thing they've ever done is be a prosecutor, it's kind of like a hammer, that if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you're a prosecutor, everything looks like the other defendant's guilty. That's just the worldview you're going to have. I mean, remember, Superior Court judges deal with more than simply criminal cases. I feel that you need to have the competency of having been a defense lawyer, so you can see it through the eyes of the defendant. If you're going to sentence somebody to life in prison, you need to have sat next to somebody being sentenced to life in prison to see how that impacts them, see how that impacts their family, see how that impacts their community and society. You need to understand the weight of that decision, not academically, but personally. You should practice civil litigation so that when you're dealing with a wrongful death case and you're trying to determine damages and how to instruct the jury, that you've been in that position before, that you felt the weight of that decision, and you see how that impacts a family when they have had a loved one die in a horrific fashion. If you're dealing with family court issues, because that also is within the purview of Superior Court, you need to know what it is like to take custody away from a mother, to rehome a child, to give parental rights back to a father. You need to know that feeling. So you have to start asking yourself those questions of competency. What has this person done before they were a judge? Also, you need to be looking at compassion. Do they have a plan to deal with young offenders? I'm of the belief that if somebody goes to jail at 17 for 5 years and they get out of jail and do the exact same thing they did before, that's a failing of the system, not the individual, because we should have been spending as a society that period of time educating them, training them, preparing them to re-enter society, as opposed to simply locking them away for 5 or 10 years, where you've given them a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, and a doctorate in crime. And now when they get out, all they are is a better criminal than they were when they went in. We need to be bringing these young people out as HVAC technicians, long-haul truck drivers, plumbers, etc., so that they can have a better life and not re-enter the system. And then finally, you have to look at the capacity of this individual to affect change. Will they change this system, or will they simply be a tool of the system that has existed previously? And if you believe the system is broken now, why would you put the same people right back in that position? You want to look for candidates who have a position that will change the court as it exists today. I think those are the primary things you need to be looking for, and ask them questions. Judicial candidates, they have time. The same thing goes with district attorneys. The same thing goes with solicitor generals. The same thing goes with anyone within that judicial branch that people don't pay attention to, because that's going to have the clearest impact on your life. Those people who are on the state and local level.
Well, I mean, we're talking with attorney Robert Patillo, who is in Atlanta, the former head of the Rainbow Push Coalition office. He's been with Reverend Jackson's, I guess, since you were in college. And we've got Lavonia Perryman, award-winning radio and TV host, indeed one of the original Rainbow members, part of Reverend Jackson's campaigns in '84 and '88, but she's been a Democratic political operative for more than 40 years and is one of the senior advisors to Hill Harper in his senatorial bid in Michigan right now, and one of the senior advisors to Dr. Cornel West in his presidential bid right now is none other than Dr. D. Dwight McKee, Reverend Dwight McKee, from the Ma'afa, the dean of the Ma'afa Redemption Project, Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, Esquire, part of the national leadership team of Rainbow Push. I'm so glad that you are here with us, senior pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church, and Josh Feinstein, you got on with us. That's right, Jewish Voice for Peace Action, Michigan. We got a lot to talk about today because it's primary day, and we need to be talking about, well, this is kind of sort of the day after the primary, as we're looking at these uncommitted the uncommitted campaigns are becoming, in this context, a movement. They're not just campaigns. We need to talk about that and what all of that means. But you know what I heard, I'm getting into TikTok, Josh and Dwight and Reverend Dr. Yuri and Vonya. And I got something from someone sent me something because they know I know Robert Patillo. And Megyn Kelly was talking about him. And she said, oh my goodness, the sky is falling. We've got a disciple of Jesse Jackson who's getting into this campaign. He is going to oppose the judge in the Fonnie Willis case. Is that true?
That is indeed true. I filed and qualified last Friday to run against Judge McAfee in the for the Fulton County judge, but it's not contrary to what Megyn Kelly may believe. Has nothing to do with Fonnie Willis. Has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Has to do with the 10 people who died in the Fulton County jail last year. That, to me, is a far bigger issue than anything that will happen in any of the instant cases. And I think that any judicial candidate needs to have a very clear and distinctive plan on how they are going to clear out these backlogs and prevent 10 people from dying this year in the Fulton County jail.
So what does a judge have to do with all of that? I mean, what does a judge oversee? I was under the impression they only oversaw the courtroom.
And that's exactly the point. They oversee their courtroom, but they have a crucial role in moving cases. For example, what often happens as a defense attorney when you go into a court in Fulton County, the prosecution comes in and says, further noticed, as in, we'll get back to you later on. And then another 3 months go by. Then you get back to court, and you say, further noticed. Another 6 months go by, and they keep kicking this can down the road. And as long as the judges allow them to do so, the can get kicked down the road for 3, 4, 5 years awaiting trial. During that time, these people are exposed to all the ravages that exist within the Fulton County jail system. If you have a judge who's dedicated to moving those cases faster, as in, if you come to my courtroom 3 times and you're not ready to proceed to trial, the case is automatically dismissed. Then you start moving those cases out and you prevent the number of deaths from happening by people being stuck in the jail system. Additionally, for youthful offenders, when judges like Sean Ellen LaGrua, Gabriel Banks, and others in the Fulton County Superior Court previously, have had diversion programs in place to stop putting 16 and 17-year-olds into Fulton County Jail, where they're exposed and they're sharing jail cells with grown 40 and 50-year-old men who are lifetime criminals. By doing so and keeping them out of that initial part of the criminal justice system and forcing them into community service, training programs, educational programs, I've seen firsthand that save young people from becoming career criminals and keeping them out of that hopper. In addition to that, requiring the prosecutors to have and keep deadlines when it comes to trial. That if you don't have something that can go to trial, we're not going on a fishing expedition for you to find it. You either need to be ready for trial, ready for a plea, or ready to dismiss, and that moves those cases along. We've fallen into this place of complacency in our criminal justice system, where as long as people are locked up in the jail system and the citizens of the community aren't complaining because of high crime, they think they've done their job. That, simply put, does not respect the constitutional rights of the individuals who are in custody and have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, as well as due process of law. Keeping people restrained and in custody for years on end without formal charges and without the opportunity for going to trial is an Eighth Amendment violation. It takes us back to the Star Chambers of the Middle Ages. And I think that has to be a place where our judges stand up and fight even-handedly to clear out these cases from the system. But as I say, if you're a lifetime prosecutor and you see things from the prosecution's point of view, then you're going to have rulings that shade towards the prosecution and allow these long areas of rendition and detention to continue.
Well, we're talking with Attorney Robert Patillo. Found out that he is running against, running not against anyone, but you're running for to become a judge. I think it's important for us to say that because he's simply an opponent. He's not some awful ogre. He has a political point of view. You may or may not agree with it, but you don't need to demonize anyone. But what he is laying out for you, which is something I think that is applicable all over the country, is an issue that we're seeing Joshua Feinstein and Lavonia Perryman and Dwight McKee and Reverend Todd Yeary, an issue that's we're watching play out in Cook County, in Baltimore County, and PG County. It's happening everywhere. So let me start with you just very quickly, because I know Robert can't stay with us very long, but I want him to, we could keep Robert forever. But what do you say about this? Because as Reverend Jackson has been going to prisons and jails every Christmas, we go to the Cook County Jail, which is not a prison, it's a jail. And we see people who've been there for years. Dwight McKee. The question is, what about judges and judgeships? We need to examine who's running much more closely than we do.
Oh, absolutely, but it's a hard task because there's so many running, and sometimes they shade their history, and you have to almost be a real sophisticated voter to have the time and energy to study who the jurists are, even though it's probably as important over time as who your senator is and who your mayor is. Because they make decisions at a basic level, as Robert was saying, and it's their decisions that most affect people's lives. And so, because the Republicans figured this out early, they really established almost a track for judges. And one of the things that they had done with the more majority is set up, Liberty College, where they actually train these young people, these young Christians, to go into the judiciary. And so they have them by now, 20 years later, they have thousands of these young guys they have trained in order to take that lane. They figured that if they could take that lane, they could get some of the conservative issues dealt with, including Roe v. Wade, which they've been successful in dealing with. And so kind of what happens is that the system just kind of cosigns on these students who are put into, that's like we have a school to prison
pipeline.
pipeline,
Mhm.
they have a college to the judiciary pipeline. And we have to learn to compete against that because that's having almost as big effect as who the president is on us.
Absolutely, because most of these cases, Livonia Perryman, they're not decided at the Supreme Court.
Absolutely. And I want to bring it back to, and everyone has said exactly what's going on, not just in Georgia, not just in Illinois. It is happening, of course, in Michigan. And I was looking at the notes, and we have a sister named Bowden, a Supreme Court justice who was appointed by our governor. And when I was looking at this issue, the individuals, the people who vote every single day need to understand that the down ballot is so important, down to a driver's license ticket, a ticket. I mean, just think about this. Everything that you do and what we do every single day is impacted by the individuals who are in the down voting situation. I mean, those individuals, the judges, the governors, the city council, the school board. School board determines one, curriculum. School board determines, the salaries of the teachers. School board determines the policies that within your school every single day. So those individuals, and what has happened, the Republicans have been working on this for 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
They figured out something like gangsters. They said, well, if we can't get the presidency, we know we can pick off and chip each state by going after the seats in terms of the Supreme Court down voting, the school board, the regent boards for colleges. They actually are attacking and running for office in colleges. And it goes back to what you're saying in terms of liberty. Reverend Jesse Jackson, by the way, took me to Liberty, and we sat there and had a discussion with the president. The point is that they're even individuals in terms of policy, money, curriculum. And we need to educate individuals who are out here every single day, 9 to 5, how important it is that these individuals impact their daily life down to how much you're going to pay for a tomato or an apple. Mm-hmm. They determine policy on the ground, and they are just as important. If some people would argue with that, they are as important as electing the president of the United States. And guess what? The example is here today, because guess what? What we are seeing in the national sphere is individuals who are making a difference on the local level. They are really, Atlanta is a good example. Here we are having a Fanny who is being chastised by local judges. Just think about it. This is not no Supreme Court discussion. This is actually happening on the grounds in Georgia, locally. And guess what? It will impact what happens nationally.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Josh, this resonated with you.
Very much so.
So tell me what's going on.
So it's interesting. I was listening to Robert and then Dwight and Livonia, and all of them hit the nail on the head. First, Robert had really well laid out about how the system is broken. But what Robert and then Dwight and Livonia alluded to is I feel a sense actually of hope. The reason I feel a sense of hope is because the down ballot is one of the solutions. If we start to lean into the down ballots, we can actually start to make up ground. I think about, come back to the Uncommitted campaign. We had 3 weeks, shoestring budget, and it wasn't just an Arab American initiative. It was everyone. It was a coalition. And so now you have this diverse, large coalition, and they're awake. We are awake. And we go around now we're going from state to state. But the idea is it's not just about the uncommitted vote. It's about what Livonia put forward about as we go to these primaries. Now we are starting to look at the 13th district here in Michigan. We're looking at the 4th state district here in Michigan. We're looking at the different races that are going on in Georgia, as was mentioned. And in that's the way we can start to gain ground on the system that has been put in place. Now, even though I feel a sense of hope, I'm still a realist. I know that we've got, when I look at it from a pro-Palestinian prism, we've got 75 years to make up. We've got 75 years of work to make up. But we are on our way. I think people are, as horrible as what's going on in Gaza is, it's been a catalyst to wake people up and say, you know what? Yeah, wait, this two-party system, it's not working. And although we've had situations like that before, where people said the two-party system is not working, and there's been several reasons as to why, where there's an opportunity right now is things have gotten so bad 6,000 miles away and have influenced people so close to home that there's a chance here that we can actually turn the tide if we join forces together. Now, I want to say one more thing is that I do not know if that consists of, developing a third party. I do know that it needs to actually coalesce into a strong voting bloc. And that voting bloc must transcend Arab Americans, African Americans, Jewish, Muslim, Christians. It has to be cohesive. And if it is, we will start to take back over time the power that has been taken from us as a people. So thank you.
Oh, no, stay right there because we're not done. We're in the throes of the primary season. Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, your thoughts?
I have many of them. So let's deal with the frame of reference about down ballot. And you and I have had regular conversations about how not paying attention to down ballot races has been probably a bigger contributor to the demise of the least amongst us than who sits in the chair at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And here's why. 97% of all legal cases happen in state court, not federal court. 97%. The vast majority of criminal cases, 97% state court, not federal court. When we talk about deaths in custody, pretrial detention is the biggest factor that influences a person's desire to take a plea, even though they know they're innocent, because what they're really trying to do is just go home. The judge, from the time that there's a charge, from the time that there's what we call presentment at a critical stage, has your liberty in their hands, and whatever terms of conditions they set pending trial is where you're going to be. So a lot of folks are in jail, not because they're danger, not because they're violent, not because they're even guilty, it's because they're poor. And so when poverty becomes criminalized, and at the same time, most jails do not have mechanisms for persons who have not lost their right to vote by a conviction. They don't have the ability to vote while they're waiting trial because the system is not in place. You now have what is in the 13th Amendment coming to real life, that slavery shall be outlawed except in instances of punishment for crime whereby a person has been duly convicted. And so what we have is proxy slavery on the clock of detention that works against the interests of the citizenry. And then when you take a plea, that then gives the conviction that disqualifies you, even though the state has not met its burden to prove each and every element of each and every offense that is charged beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the system. And so when you have a judge who's now running in a special election, the reason he's on the ballot is because he was appointed by the governor when there was a vacancy. Well, who elects the governor? When is the governor's race coming up? We tend not to be interested in who's going to go to the state capitol because we keep getting the Jedi mind trick of the big shiny thing as the only thing that somehow matters. And that's why we got to be serious about what's happening, because at the end of the day, it's not just who's writing the state budgets. If I gave you a round number, $10 trillion every single year moves through public coffers, $6+ trillion at the federal level, in the aggregate, a little north of $3 trillion through state budgets. Where is that money going? Where is it? What's being funded? And so when you have a judge who's getting the special election treatment, who comes from a county where he was a prosecutor and the county population is 90,000, and he's now put on the bench to be a Superior Court judge in a county where the population is 1 million people with an M, Now you have a difference in the potential to influence. And so the question becomes, how do you make sure that the governors who appoint the judges are held accountable? How are the judges who are appointed by the governors held accountable? And recognize that this is not an aberration that you hear of just in Fulton County, Georgia. Got a call just yesterday about a potential case right here in Baltimore in one of the county jurisdictions, where in a local jail, we've got multiple plaintiffs who found, get ready for it, rat poison in their food.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be real clear on just how egregious the dynamics are that lead to the need for civic accountability, not civic participation, civic accountability for the way the system operates using public dollars. And so that's where we've got to have the robust conversation about why you must vote. It's not about who you vote for. What scares them, who you vote for does not scare them. Showing up to vote at all scares the you know what out of them. And the reason it does is because there's accountability in the system at the local, state, and federal level, and they don't want to be held accountable. Because if you change who's making the appointments, who's writing the budgets, who's making sure that the deck is stacked against the interests of the people, you can change the system. They know that. They just don't want you to believe that, so that you allow them to keep doing what they've always been doing, which is bamboozling the people.
Robert Patillo, before you go, I know you are in the midst of your campaign, and God bless you. And I think, you know, and let us be very clear, Josh and Livonia and Dwight and Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, he's been drafted. This was not something that he sought to do. People said, much like Reverend Jackson when he ran for president, you remember he was trying to get Maynard Jackson or Andrew Young to do it. He was like, I'm too controversial. If you do it, well, the people drafted him. They said, no, you run, Jesse, you run. And they've done that with Robert Patillo. Robert Patillo, what do you want us to know? Not just about Fulton County. I mean, because we're having, by the time this is broadcast, we will have had primaries in your state, right? And in Washington state. We're watching the Leave It Blank and the Uncommitted campaigns. I mean, there's just so much going on. I mean, and here we thought this was going to be a boring primary season because, you know, it's kind of predetermined, yes, who the presidential candidates nominees are going to be. Oh, no, things are on and cracking. What do you want us to know?
Well, you know, as you said, it's interesting when you say the drafting part of it, because I think you, Todd, and Dwight know that I probably the one of the last choices most people would have to think that I'll be running for judge at any point in time. But with that, I was actually in Vegas with my wife, getting ready to go to the casino, and somebody called me and said, would I be interested in running? And that's kind of what got the ball rolling on this. It really was a people-powered movement. But I think we need more people to answer that call in the affirmative, because initially I said no. My wife told me to reconsider it. But often we do not have enough people who are either in private practice or who are in corporate life willing to make the sacrifice to go into government. And that is why it's so difficult to get good quality people as district attorneys, as judges, city council people, county commissioners, etc. And those are the people who make the ultimate decisions about your community. If you want to know why there are potholes in your street, that's a state and local issue. If you want to understand why one community is getting snow removed and another one is not, that's a state and local issue. If you want to understand why police are patrolling certain neighborhoods and not yours, state and local issue. And those are the elections that don't happen every 4 years. They happen on, like in Georgia, a random May 21st of 2024 is when this election is. And we have to keep our eyes open. We have to keep our minds open. We have to understand, and we have to turn out for every single election. There's no such thing as an unimportant election. And as soon as we understand that and start voting our numbers, we'll start changing policy nationwide.
Robert,
Well, can I say this real quick, Santita?
Very quickly.
We do know if Robert is running, the Second Amendment is safe.
Oh, hallelujah. Well, Robert, how can we get in? How can we keep track of
We have the campaign website up and running. Go to judgepatillo.com, JUDGEPATILLO. Make a contribution, sign up for the mailing list. We'll get more information up, social media running. Like I said, it's been like a solid 72 hours since it started. So we're building the plane as we're flying it.
Oh my goodness. Well, that sounds like the Jackson campaign. I mean, all I can tell you is that that's what we did. I mean, and it worked.
Sound like all the campaigns I've ever worked on. Every single one. I'm still flying.
I mean, and this is how you change things. I mean, corporate politics is not what we're looking for. We want people who are really going to go in and make some change. I mean, if not now, has a slate of candidates that they are endorsing, and I want to hear. I can't endorse anyone here. But what I can do is give you exposure. I mean, because what we've learned from you today is the questions that we need to be asking of these judicial candidates. And we need to be educated because all of these people, the president, the vice president, they're lovely. It's bright and shiny and fabulous. But they don't deal with your potholes, or they don't even control how many polling places you have open. They had more than 100 polling stations that were, well, what is it? 60. I think they only had like 6 polling stations that were open a couple of years ago in Milwaukee. 6 for Milwaukee, the whole city. Who does that? And in Kentucky, what they had 2? You know, for the county, for half a million people. I mean,
Jefferson County too.
Yeah, I mean, that's a local decision. So everybody get involved. Robert Patillo, we wish you the best. And hey, run, Robert, run.
Thanks so much.
Sending you much love, and give our love to your wife.
She's gonna need it because she wasn't ready for all this. She was planning summer travel, and here I go with my mess again.
No, she told you. She told you what you needed to do. My mama told my father what he needed to do, and I'm glad y'all listen.
Absolutely.
Sending you much love.
Thank you.
Thank you for the education. Josh Feinstein, Jewish Voice for Peace Action, Washington State, Georgia, Uncommitted or Leave It Blank. Whatever it is, we are looking for answers. It seems like things did not stop in Michigan.
That's correct.
They didn't stop in Minneapolis.
That is correct.
Minnesota. They're not. It's what is going on?
So again, I think people are awake, Santita. I think what we'll see, when your listeners listen, hopefully I think we will hear, quote, good news from Georgia and Washington State. But after that, there's a lot of big states still coming up, Wisconsin, Connecticut. And I think for the sake of this show, I want to lean in more into that idea of the down ballot, because what we've noticed is the Uncommitted is a big movement. It's one track, but it's part of a greater whole. We have groups going to city councils, city by city, saying, we demand a permanent ceasefire resolution. It may be symbolic, but now people are getting involved. And as they're getting involved, what they've noticed, honestly, is there's quite a lot of bigotry and racism that they're dealing with. But what they've also discovered is maybe I, as an Arab American or someone from a minority group, maybe I should be on the city council. And their eyes are opening about, you know something? I'm going to get involved in government. And that's the exciting part, is seeing people say, you know what? There is no difference between me and that person sitting there. If anything, that person is my employee and they are not doing a good job. And so never mind the potholes. How about just basic litmus test of humanity? So the exciting part here is that we're talking about down ballots. We're talking about people now getting involved in the races that matter. And yes, the Uncommitted is it's been a nice spark that's helped it going. And over the next couple of weeks and couple of months, we're going to continue to see the Uncommitted grow. But the exciting part about it is the fire it will light on a movement to actually get people involved in government in a way that actually we can start to fight the system and change things. Does that make sense, I hope?
No, it does make sense, because I'm beginning to see that sense as I watch a Hill Harper, who, quite frankly, has had a limitless career as an actor in Hollywood. But he's also, we all know Hill, and love him. He is also there's been a tension with him between his creative and civic sides, which I get because that's been a tension I've had play out in my own life. Just you've got the opportunity to be in this play, to be in this movie, to be on this television show, but you see this happening in your community, and you're like, I've got to do something. And people are doing some things, Livonia. I mean, they are looking at running for office. They're not listening to the corporate media and even the major parties say, in the primary season, you're helping Trump. They're like, no. I've got to have, my voice needs to be heard, Livonia.
Absolutely. With Hill, as people know, and most of the folk here know, he was offered, just think about this, $20 million.
Say that one more time.
Hill Harper was offered $20 million, not making it up, it's a fact, to step out of that particular race running for Senate. Now, that tells you how important that position is, to run against Congresswoman Tlaib. That was the conversation, making it up. That was a factual conversation. He chose to say, no, I am not going to take $20 million to step aside or go against someone that the people decided they wanted in office.
Wait. Let me give people a little context for that.
Sure.
When you raise money as a public official, and if you have that money left over when you retire, that money is your own.
Yes.
So he rejected a $20 million potentially payday for himself. I just think it's important for us to
absolutely. So, for example, if the campaign only cost $10 million, he at the end of the campaign, he could actually bank $10 million for the rest of his life. Think about that. But just to offer that. Right. And that will tell you, and it shows you how important it is to, as you said, to be involved in politics, to be a public servant. I really believe there's a difference between a politician and a public servant.
Of course.
Just for the record, Hill Harper's been a public servant as he was doing movies and series. He worked with Clinton, he worked with Obama, he was in the Obama unofficial cabinet. They had been not only friends, but he actually was knocking on doors, encouraging people in neighborhoods across the country. He and Vice President Harris, before she became vice president, they were part of a whole, surrogate team to make sure that people knew that this was so important on the down ballot. So now here, some people say, well, why would you leave such a cushy job? Why would you come to Detroit at that? Why would you come to a place where they're struggling and they're challenged? Well, he said it was the best place for him to come to bring up his son and to really make a difference in the community. He did not want to leave this planet without doing what he has been in his heart. And so here we are. Now, is the party supporting? That's questionable. Are the people supporting him? They're trying. Is it about money and votes? I keep telling folks, it is about money and votes. And you must acknowledge that this is a do or die election. He is the only brother. He would be the first African-American in the state of Michigan, first African-American to actually have that seat as senator of the state of Michigan.
But more than that, you know what? He's a true progressive.
Yes.
Because Clarence Thomas is Black, right?
Huh?
I'm not mad. I mean, I just think, I have identity politics. I get it, but I have identify politics. I got to figure out if I identify with you in principle. And one of the things that I love about Hill and other candidates of that ilk are what they're representing. I mean, it's not about the money.
No.
This is about serving people and about going to the state capitol, about going to City Hall, about going to Washington, and not just making a difference. People want change, and they want positive change, and that is something that he really wants to do, and others like him. It's not not just him. I mean, I think to Josh's point, this is a moment in which people really see themselves making a difference in the world, Livonia.
And I call his campaign a campaign movement. And you're right, Josh. It is a movement that we're looking at, not just with HEAL alone. When you look at the uncommitted, if you look at young folk, what is sparked, there is some fire going on. There's a
hold that thought. Hold that thought, because I didn't realize I'm running out of time here. Wait a minute. 1 minute for Dwight and 1 minute for Reverend Dr. Ury. Goodness gracious. Dwight McKee, 1 minute. Oh my stars.
Yeah, and the irony with Brother Hill is if he wins, it probably is a step down for him. Since he was he's a bona fide movie star and gets a bona fide paycheck. And so it's really a sacrifice for him, which says a lot about his character there. And he actually was the one that began to take Obama to the prisons and expose him to that when they were at college together. At Harvard together.
Harvard Law.
Yeah, he's a special kind of guy. So fight the good fight for that one, because he's worth putting in that office.
That's right, because I identify. Reverend Dr. Ury, 1 minute.
To Sister Livonia's point, to Joshua's point, to Dwight's point, when you consider an offer of $20 million to run for a particular office, consider this. That money is expected to come with a return on investment, right? Yes. It's not just to get a particular outcome. They expect something out of it. They have calculated the value proposition. And so when we consider the value of the vote, there's a willingness to spend big money to try to direct your vote in a particular way to protect particular interests for a particular return. That is why everybody needs to get ready, check your registration, check your election dates, and go to every opportunity you have to vote, because $20 million as an offer says they will buy your vote, and they're not afraid to buy it for a whole lot of money.
Everybody go to vote.org, vote.org. Find out if your name has been purged from the roll. That's what you want to find out. Has your name been purged from the rolls? And when you get to the polls, if you have any trouble, don't leave. Don't accept that provisional ballot. Call 1-866-OUR-VOTE. 1-866-OUR-VOTE. And do not leave until your issue has been resolved. These are lawyers who are putting in their time to make sure that you get your vote counted.
Here.
Okay?
Here.
That's what I told you. Identity politics, that's great. I identify with people who want to make a certain kind of change. Change is neutral, like time. It's the kind of change that you want. It's what you do with your time. Let's think about that, everybody. Now is the time. It's in the zeitgeist. It's in the spirit of the times when we can make a world, a new world. So come on, come aboard. This freedom train is all the way down the track. Come on, join us. Josh Feinstein, Jewish Voice for Peace Action, Reverend Dr. Todd Ury, brilliant lawyer, Rainbow Push, and Reverend Dr. Cornell West Campaign, Dwight McKee, sending you so much love. AM 950 Radio, I love you. God bless you. Have a great one.
Thank you.